So we're going to focus on solutions today and hope to arm you with some really amazing resources that you can take home and implement. I have an amazing group of panelists with us here today that I'm going to ask to introduce themselves, and then we'll get it going.
Hi, I am Tatum Alsep, the founder and CEO of Music Health Alliance, and we bring access to healthcare to anyone who's made a living in the music industry. That includes how you're going to pay for your care, what do you need to navigate, all things healthcare, and then connection with resources from financial to medical.
And she rocks. Hi, I'm Erica Cruzen. I work for Gibson, and we also have our foundation, Gibson Gives, that I oversee. I am a licensed therapist in the state of Tennessee and California, and I am happy to join here.
Hello, Michelle August here. I help run the Neil Cassell Music Foundation, and thank you, Hillary and Relix, for having us. The Neil Cassell Music Foundation donates resources and raises awareness for musicians' mental health and donates instruments to areas where Neil grew up in New Jersey. Thank you.
I'm Andy Frasco, a musician who definitely needs a therapist. And I have a podcast called Andy Frasco's World Saving Podcast, where we talk about mental health and addiction in the music industry.
We have seen the music industry shift significantly in the past 5 years as we talk about mental health. There are more resources than ever. We're lucky enough that conversations like this are happening more and more. How have you seen the shift happen in your own respective worlds? And also, what do you hope to see in the next 5?
Well, and the pandemic really helped enable us to talk about mental health more and more vocally, because it's something that affected everyone across the nation. In our industry, the words mental health, brain health, it's a tale as old as time with the creative brain. Fortunately, I feel like now we have access to more resources. The Affordable Care Act has enabled mental health to be covered by your health insurance, and there are more counselors. It's just finding the right fit. So there are pros and cons to both, in my opinion.
I think the number of counselors is certainly something we should talk about just from the jump. If any of you have tried to find mental health care recently, it can be really challenging. You're often facing a 6-week to 6-month wait list to see someone. That's something that Backline is really actively working against, and we now have more than 500 clinicians around the country in all 50 states. So if you are someone who's looking for a provider or some help, come to us. We can help you find someone that understands the music industry, and you're only going to have to wait generally 48 hours to get that list of resources together. So it's significantly shorter than most other avenues to getting help. Erica, what do you hope to see in the next 5 years here?
Well, I think, backstage we were talking about how important it is for the industry themselves, like within the business. So the agents, the managers, not just the artists seeking, but providing a space for them to talk about it with even their bosses or their coworkers. Providing that space that they don't feel afraid that they might lose their job or they might seem weak, as I've heard some people say. So I think creating, like you've said about, we've seen it increase. We've seen finally that stigma decrease and the resources increase. And I think it's important that we make sure to continue the conversation, to know before artists are going out on tour, co-workers in the industry are needing help. Go ahead and ask those questions. Don't just talk, I always say, don't just talk about the accomplishments. Talk about the things that you're struggling with as well. And so again, just making sure that the conversation continues is daily. And having panels like this in the industry to open it up and create this conversation.
Michelle heads the Neil Casal Music Foundation, and they started following the loss of an amazing, amazing person, dearly missed. Backline also started in part due to the loss of Neil, and so our organizations have similar timelines in getting started. So we really have been part of the shift over the past 3.5 years. What do you think, we need to push here as we move forward?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts that the foundation has had is in allowing people to process their grief, and at least for the people that have brought the projects that the foundation has brought, it's not just the people working on those projects, but it's the community. We've heard from fans of Neil's that we've given them opportunities to heal from grief, whether it's suicide or even just any of that processing is, we've been able to create art from that. So I think just having these opportunities to process grief and healing, that's what we've been aiming to do.
Grief is unfortunately a universal human experience. And I think acknowledging that and providing space for the conversation and the processing is a really powerful avenue to community healing, right? And Backline now, every single Tuesday, has a grief support group. And it's an amazing space because we have some regular attendees that come every single week, and I'm processing right now some anticipatory grief around my parents aging. And so I'm using that as a space to learn and grow myself. But when there's a loss in the industry now, an email automatically goes to the festival family or the band family that's processing that loss to say, hey, we hold down this space every week for people like you and I who are going through this universal experience. And so we see new groups of people joining. And there's a lot of healing that can happen in business groups, right? So we had an entire band join the grief support group, and you're having conversations in that space moderated by a licensed therapist that you're maybe not able to have in the bus on your own, without some sort of guidance. And so I couldn't agree more, like having conversations and having, even if it's just the resource being available, that's a change that I hope to see a lot more of. Andy, we have done some of these conversations together, so I feel, we're aligned on a lot of things. But you've made a name for yourself as both a nonstop party and a mental health advocate. How do you walk that line?
It's a very oxymoron, I know. That sounds like a... I think I deal with struggles with depression, anxiety on a daily basis, and I was coping with it from having one-night stands, doing coke, and drinking all the time to suppress my feelings, and because I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about this. And that's mainly the reason why I started the podcast, was because to show people that musicians are afraid to talk to the family members who are at home and not on tour, and that to cope with what's going on. So we have to talk to musicians to understand that we're not just crazy people living in this circus. And the most important thing we could do is talk about it. If we suppress everything we're going through, then it's just gonna stay in there until it ends up becoming cancer, ends up becoming overthinking. With the whole Neil situation is too. I wish I was at Lock-In the day before, and I wish we all knew what was going on in his head to make sure that we could just show, depression is very hidden, and just to show that we're not alone in this fight, that we're going through the same mental exhaustion of doing 250 shows a year and hiding your alcoholism or hiding your sexism or sex addiction or whatever it is, that I want people to not be afraid to start talking about those conversations. Like, we go to the doctor to fix our bad knee, or if we we got to lose the stigma that our brain is just as important as any other part of our body. So.
Yeah, the stigma is slowly fading, and I think it's thanks to a lot of people in this room and the people on the stage. But I do have to give a shout out to Peter Shapiro himself, who was the first person that said, "Hey, I heard what you're doing." At this point, we didn't even have a name for Backline. He poked in, he said, "Hey, I heard what you're doing. I want to support it, whatever you need." And he has done that in so many ways. And one of the best ways is we have a venue signage program. There's a piece of paper in every Brooklyn Bowl green room that says mental health and wellness resources for people in the music industry. It has a QR code. It's easy to scan the QR code, take a picture of the sign, whatever it is. And we know that people may not use it that day or the next day, but if something happens, we want them to know that's where they should go. They should come to us and we'll help them navigate whatever they're going through. And so I think that's done a lot to end the stigma, right? Now when I go talk to someone or I meet with a band, they're like, "Oh yeah, I think we saw you in some backstage space somewhere." And there's 275 rooms around the country that are doing that. We want to see that be 2,000 rooms around the country and more, so that it's everywhere, it's easy. I'll be in the room and I'll hear somebody point to Backline and then say, "Hey, I used this thing recently, and do you guys know about this?" And because it's on the wall, it's easier to bring up, right? And so that's part of the work that we're doing in destigmatizing the conversation. And I think it has to go hand in hand with resources provided. Tatum, you are doing the heavy lifting every day of helping people get and navigate the health insurance industry. Oftentimes these conversations that we have around mental health in the music industry are coupled with the music industry is underinsured. So you're doing the work to battle that. Tell me more.
Yeah, we're the fools of the business. No, not really. I was almost bankrupted by medical bills 20 years ago with the birth of twins, and this was pre-Affordable Care Act. So fast forward, I thought that my story was isolated and I was the only one, and I'm not. 76% of our industry, the music and entertainment industry as a whole, has no access to group benefits. I mean, we're self-employed and part of small businesses. Y'all know this better than any of us. So building a nonprofit to help navigate that with people who are from our industry has just become my life's mission and the mission of Music Health Alliance. So what we do, we're not an insurance company. I mean, we are straight up a nonprofit. We don't have anything to sell. But now we've got a team of 16 advocates that know the landscape of every state in the nation and how the state programs, the federal programs, the nonprofits in the area, how they operate, because the first thing we want to do is figure out how you're going to pay for your care. And sometimes that's health insurance, sometimes it's with grants, sometimes it's with negotiating down medical bills. But the biggest piece here is that you're not alone in this process. If you make a living in this industry, you qualify for our services. And anyone that calls is safe. Everything we do is confidential. No one will know you called unless you share that information. And it's not just for you, it's for you and your family members, your partner, if you have a dependent parent who is trying to figure out how to navigate Medicare. I mean, it is tricky, tricky, tricky. And we've all become licensed, not because we want to sell something, but because understanding the law has become our greatest tool and weapon when it comes to navigating. And accompanied with the navigation process are some payment mechanisms. What we found during the pandemic was there were lots of people who needed counseling, and we have these great resources like Music Cares and ACM Lifting Lives and Sweet Relief, but they can't turn a check quickly to get counseling. So we've built a mental health fund that'll provide up to $1,000 in counseling. And that's generally about 8 visits, because what we know is a lot of health insurance, while it covers counseling, some of the counselors that you might know or want to see don't accept health insurance. So we needed, and that's for a psychiatry visit, an assessment, or talk counseling, not inpatient, because we've got other resources for that. So just know that these things are available to you, to your teams, and we're here to serve. And I mean, honestly, there's no gimmick here. It's just who we are and what we do. So call us, go to musichealthalliance.com. You can read about any of the mental health programs that we have. And we depend on all of these partnerships to keep our brain health alive and well on the road. And we all need each other to do that.
And I'll just add, and I recently left Music Cares, but worked closely with Tatum, and all of the nonprofits, the music charitable programs that are in this business work together and talk daily. So if there is a need that's greater than Music Health Alliance can do, Music Cares can step in and do some. Jazz Foundation, I mean, it's a number of, we have an entire network of these programs that will work together to get the best, help that you guys can get and to make those dollars go farther.
Collaboration is certainly the name of the game, but I think as we look at, approaching the industry and trying to get folks to buy into what we're doing, right? All of us have conversations with management, with agencies, and it's always, what's the cost, right? And we do everything that we can to make these resources accessible, make them low cost. But I think it's often assumed that the cost should be pushed off to someone else. So the label should pay for it. The management company should pay for it. Where do you stand on that? Like, how do we make sure that everyone has access to these resources and that the funds are filled, right, and fundraised for? How do we work together as an industry to make sure that these things are everywhere? Well, that's an open question. I don't know the answer. So
I've got a lot of thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, that's a question that's been asked for a long time, is who's going to pay for it, and I think that's where organizations like ours have stepped in to offer these free groups. Like you were talking about your support groups. Music Cares has quite a few support groups, Solace for Hope, and it goes on, because at least if we can provide something, that's better than nothing. And then to also work with therapists in the industry that do care about these clients and want to offer reduced services as well. So I think that there are a lot of resources to help. Where I do stand is I think that labels, management, agents, if they want to see longevity with their client, they've got to figure out ways to help pay this.
Yeah, and I think also we need to think about the stagehands, the tour managers. Like, the label isn't going to pay your roadie for mental health, and we need to either, as artists, step up to the plate and take care of the people who take care of us as well. So I think that's part of my initiation as well. So
we're seeing more and more, people making donations to Backline and treating it as an investment in community care. And oftentimes in these meetings and negotiations, it's like, what's the ROI, right? Because we're all business people, and that's the name of the game here. What is the ROI in investing in these services? I mean, Andy, can you talk about your band and what you've seen change as people have tapped into resources?
Oh yeah, we are a bunch of wild dogs, and I know that about my band. I picked them out myself, each dog. So to understand that we had a problem, because we were going 3 years ago. I mean, I've been doing 250 shows a year for the last 15 years, and just living in a van, the size in a coffee can, and with these guys, and dealing with staying up till 4 a.m. to load out our stuff, and waking up at 9 a.m. to all cram into a van, to realize yeah, we need help. And you guys were the first person I called, and my band is all signed up with Backline, and you guys literally saved my band's career because we couldn't handle this. You can't talk to anyone. Like, the stigma of talking about this has only been like 3 to 5 years. Like, what about those first 10 of our career where we were just suppressing our feelings? Like, maybe we all fucking hated each other or something, you know, and we can't talk about it. So for you to like let us have the communication with someone outside of our band, like I was talking with John from The Head and the Heart, and they were having band therapy sessions in the van together, and it helped so much to like have someone talk about it that isn't in part of like your manager. Like my manager Schwartz, you just heard him talk for an hour and a half. He's my therapist, and sometimes I don't want to talk shit about him to his face, you know what I'm saying? So it's nice. Sorry about that, Schwartz. I know you're in here. I don't say it a lot, but it's nice to know that that younger bands are asking us, older bands, that, hey, how can I help with figuring out my bass player's mental illness versus just all sitting silent in the van for 7 hours. And that's why I'm so thankful that there's more companies like Nucci Space and Backline to really help, you know, change the dialogue of mental health. So it's like I'm really looking forward to having more conversations with this, and I'm just so thankful that we're finally at a point where we're losing that stigma. So I just want to say thank you guys for not charging us too much money to deal with our mental health. So thank you.
Sounds like the ROI is in shows played, right? And I think any business person knows that's how we're making money out here, right? So the ROI is in songs written, in lives changed, right? And I think that one of the things that I'm really excited to talk about is kind of dark, but there's hope in saving lives right now as we talk about opioid overdose. And Erica, last year Gibson Gives announced a new program, Tempo, that trains music industry professionals to save lives using naloxone, which can reverse opioid overdoses. Over $1 million in doses have been committed so far, and I think that has to be the largest effort to combat overdose in our industry thus far. So thank you. Can you tell us more about how you came to build the program and what you're seeing so far as you're implementing it?
Absolutely. It's the programs we're most excited about and most proud of. We started this about 2019, talking about what can we do and how can we make a difference in this industry with what's going on and what we're seeing. And we formed together with Music Cares, with Solace for Hope, and a few other organizations. Now we're about 15 organizations strong, working in the music industry to help battle this. But what we came up with was training. It's called Tempo. It's training and empowering musicians to prevent overdose. And we thought, let's provide a training. Just start with a website. Provide training and distribution of naloxone. We were getting these through grants, and then over the years, people caught the attention of what we were doing. We went to Hikma, which is a pharmaceutical company that produces naloxone. They produce an 8 milligram versus a 4 milligram dose that Narcan utilizes. And that is because we're seeing that, as many of you have heard, the fentanyl crisis that is in not just heroin or other opioids, but in cocaine and methamphetamines and actually marijuana too. And so, jumping around a bit, but it was important to join forces with someone who would help us with this cause. We found that as we started letting people know that we're going to do this, the asks were coming in. We had whole groups of production companies coming to us and saying, we need naloxone. Naloxone units are $75 a piece, so they're not easy to get. There are some states that still look at naloxone which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. But they were not able to get these because police and law enforcement still treated it as drug paraphernalia. And so it made it really difficult. So we were trying to figure out how can we make it easier. So we just started doing it. And we did it organically and just grew it to when we got HICMA on board and they donated $1 million worth of naloxone to our Tempo program to distribute to the music industry. This is through music venues, like one, right here, all the way to university medical schools and big production companies like South by Southwest, and then on to festivals where we distribute it at our one in our backyard, Pilgrimage Music Festival.
It's a great one, just for the record.
And so then what happened was we joined forces with the makers of One Box. And this One Box is really cool, and we just announced this recently at the end of January that we are making these available to all live music venues throughout Nashville. And inside this box, I can't hold this and talk at the same time. I'll let you demonstrate. Inside this box is a video, and this box is meant to be sat behind the counter and or anywhere where you have life-saving services. Video instructions, how to use naloxone nasal spray, comes with a little CPR kit and CPR mask, and it also is in Spanish, step by step. These should be at every single live music venue. They should be on tours with bands. They should be in medical or university music schools, and anywhere else you think that they can be. When we announced it to Nashville, thank you, Nashville live music venues, we got quite a few calls to have come down and do the training and install these in. And now we've had live venues in Austin, in Seattle, in West Virginia, and New York, all asking for these. So this will help save lives. This is a way that we can offer these also for free. We've been generously donated these boxes from the makers, as well as the naloxone. Happy to get these to any of you, and it's just the start.
Woo. Can I tag on that for a minute?
Please.
So we were talking backstage, and Erica, who's a licensed therapist, brought up something that I hadn't heard because I'm not in the recovery community on a daily basis. We're looking at healthcare in a broad stroke. And she said that rock bottom is not the same as rock bottom anymore. And that's something that I hadn't really heard. And I've got 2 kids in college, and you can get pot from the guy down the street, and it's being sprayed with fentanyl. And it's not rock bottom anymore. It's one time for some people. So this isn't, this is something that's plaguing our industry, and it is important. And if there is anything we can do to prevent it, why wouldn't we? So pick up the phone and call and get these, because it really, it could save my kid's life. It could save your kid's life. It could save bands' lives. It matters so much.
We also, and just one other thing, if you go to our website, tempomission.org, there are also resources on there for those that are struggling with family members who are using, or those who have lost family members or friends or bandmates to overdose.
It's amazing work that you're doing, and I think the conversation is broadened now. When we started talking mental health, we kept saying mental health and wellness. And opioid overdose has everything to do with mental health and wellness, just the same as a wellness routine does, right? So waking up in the morning and knowing that you're going to get your meditation in can help keep somebody on the right path, can help keep them out of danger, help them not relapse if they're sober, these different things. And it's very much not a one-size-fits-all game here. And so looking at the conversation, it's so broad at this point, and it is involved in each part of the music industry. How can venues play a part in creating a healthier and happier music industry? How can promoters, how can festivals, I really want to give the audience here the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to go back and make sure that we get Narcan or naloxone for our staff. What are some other ways that you think we can really be engaging in preventative community care?
Well, I'll just speak from, I mean, I've seen you guys backstage with Music Cares as well. Having a space back there with festivals or live music venues is crucial. These are artists that are coming through, not just artists, the bus drivers, the crew, they're coming through and who knows how much time they've had to dedicate to any self-care. So it's important to make sure, like you were talking about earlier, those QR codes are in the back. I love that, by the way. I did not know that, that these are here. But then also what we've helped to start was at Pilgrimage Music Festival, I'll just bring that up since it's in our backyard, that we have a wellness area back there. There's massage, there's IV, there's mental health resources, there's naloxone training. So there's a lot creating those space that makes artists and touring professionals realize that you do actually care about them and that you want them to have a good experience there at their festival and moving on to other places.
There's one other thing that we had right before the pandemic and then through the pandemic, and the Americana music space, there was a series of lost to suicide. And one of the tools that we found, and this is so simple, but it's a forum that's created by a professor at Columbia and I think Dartmouth, but it's by mental health, a therapist and a PhD. And it is a suicide prevention forum, and it's not called that, but it's this forum that we sent on the road with tour managers, and they would have their whole band and crew fill it out, and the tour manager would keep one, and the crew band member would keep the other in their instrument case. But it was a real simple form that just had things that brought you joy, people that mattered, people that you could reach out to. And if the tour manager or any of the bandmates saw anyone feeling a little blue or maybe something's a little off, they would remind them of this form. And it was something so simple that anybody can keep and do. So I just want to throw that out there. You can Google it and find it, but it was really helpful and something we keep in our back pocket at all times for our own staff.
Yeah, something that just came to mind actually sitting here is being a demonstration to your artists and taking care of yourselves. And if you get overwhelmed, having people that you can go to and building trust with people and getting support yourselves, I think, because we, as kind of the tip of the spear or the leaders taking care of musicians, we need support too, or whatever that looks like for you. I think just to be that demonstration, and that's all.
Michelle, I'm gonna.
Is there a way to get therapists to these festivals to make sure that they have a space? Like, a lot of people are afraid to go to therapy. Maybe they're suppressing their feelings. Is there a way to get maybe a on-deck therapist at some of these big festivals?
They do it, and I actually participated in that with Coachella and Stagecoach. So festivals are starting to do that, where they'll have them back of house and front of house.
We've considered that a lot, and often when we talk to festivals as backline, they say, all right, great, can you bring a therapist backstage? One of the issues that we see is a continuity of care. So if you are feeling emboldened that day to sit down with the therapist and unload, you may not live in that state, right? And so you're not going to be able to see that therapist again after the fact. So one of the things that Backline is now trying to offer is case management on site. So we're not going to have a therapy session, but we are going to sit down and ask you about your insurance status, about how much you can afford to pay for sessions, where you live, what you need, so that you're getting that resource pack when you leave and you can walk away with that, right? And I think counseling on site is a beautiful thing and often needed. We see it a lot around grief, right? If there's an artist that was supposed to play the festival or somebody that was supposed to be there that couldn't be, there will be counseling on site. And I think, just the fact that people are asking for it is amazing, right? Because we used to go to festivals and it was like, how hard can I disassociate for 4 days? And now people are seeing festivals as part of their lives, right? And part of their work and business, right? And so people are attending the wellness sessions. People are leaving the festival early to get some sleep. I mean, the whole thing has changed immensely in the past 5 years. And the fact that people want to see if we can do therapy on site, awesome. I love that we're having that conversation. Michelle, we've spoken at length about Neil's legacy of kindness. I have a great story of a show that he played at the Capitol Theater, and we were all gonna, ride out of there together. And it took Neil about a half hour to get out of the building. If you all have been to the Capitol Theater, there's a big staircase that goes out from the green room. And he was stopping, opening every door, popping in and saying, thank you so much. I mean, he probably talked to 100 people in 25 minutes on our way out. How have you seen this legacy of kindness reflect in the work that you're doing with the Neil Casal Music Foundation?
So I think one of the ways is, let's see, so going back to the grief processing and giving people permission to feel grief if they have. We have people expressing their own suicide stories of being touched by people who have left them. And just, giving that permission, I think, is one of the ways. Another way, I think, is just emulating Neil and being present with people is, I think, if you knew Neil, he was just very present, and that's a simple way.
What are some of the hurdles and the challenges that foundations and nonprofits face right now?
Fundraising, another simple thing. I think resource management, finding ways to be able to use the resources that we have to build programs and create more art and support our artists in creating their art. It's huge. I think that's one of the reasons we're all sitting here is to find. I don't have an answer for that either. It's, I think, the big question mark.
Tatum, challenges in this world?
I think that nonprofit and challenge are synonymous. It's the nature of the beast. I mean, it's a nonprofit, and when you take the profit motive out, there's a lot of good, but it's really hard to raise money all the time and keep your doors open. And there's always more work than staff. But at the end of the day, we go home and we know we've done something good. And that continues to be our mission too, is if we've made a difference that day, then it matters, and we'll keep fighting the good fight. And we at Music Health Alliance feel like healthcare is a human right and not a have and have not type thing. It's a basic human right that we should all have access to equally. And when you cross our threshold or call us, it's going to be safe. We don't care who you voted for, and we don't care how much money you make. We care that you love music as much as we do, and you want to keep making it. And that goes back to that return on investment. In our industry, career longevity is success. And you cannot be successful in our industry and not be healthy of the mind, body, and spirit. You just can't. And sex, drugs, and rock and roll, we all know. I mean, that's kind of a misnomer. You can do that for a minute, but it's not going to last. So things like, I just totally took that question. I'm going in totally different directions. Bear with me. But I'm listening to Andy talk about being in the tin can, and we've all been there. And it's so easy to talk about, well, you can eat healthy and take your tour routing, and you make sure you know where a Trader Joe's and an Aldi and a Whole Foods is. But when you're in the thick of it and you're in that creative space, it's not that easy. But if you plan, like there's something that we found is a jail cell workout, and you have exercise bands and you stop on the side of the road and you just schedule it like you would a business meeting. There are things that we can do, all of us, whether you're an agent or you're running a touring company or you're the road crew, to help build our own career longevity. And we all have to have some ownership in that personally. And I'm sitting up here at the most unhealthy I've ever been in my whole life, and all I do is talk to people about being healthy all day long. So I'm with you when I say this is a struggle for all of us. But it starts up here with our mental health. And I don't know why golfers have psychologists that go on tour with them all the time. It is as much a part of their routine as it is perfecting their swing, you know, and we have vocal coaches that help us strengthen our voices. Why are we not paying more attention to our brains? You know, I mean, we've got to continue to change this dialogue and talk about it, because the career longevity is going to be a lot shorter if we're not.
Yeah, and yes, round of applause. I think you're exactly right. There is no one-size-fits-all for mental health and wellness. And so I think it really is an individual journey. It's a band journey. It's a venue journey to figure out what's going to work for you collectively and what's going to work for you individually so that you can show up as your best self. And so there are a ton of resources here on stage and out there, you know, to tap into a wellness practice, therapy, substance abuse treatment, you know, whatever it is that you might need, I implore everyone to ask yourself that question and to, you know, start the process of how can I better myself, right? And we see our community improving with each one person deciding to take that first step. What are, you know, final thoughts before we go to Q&A? What are the things you're most excited about? What do you want people to leave with? Action items, tangibles? Anybody?
I got a question. Do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure, ask a question.
So they talk about how ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin are helping with mental health and rewiring our brains. How do you, as a therapist, how do you approach people who are overtaking ketamine or overtaking MDMA or overtaking psilocybin when everyone's telling us that it's supposed to help our brains?
That's a longer question than right here, but I'm glad you're asking it because it is coming up in practice quite a bit. I think that there's a few questions you need to ask, and one is making sure that that client who is engaging in this has a therapist, has a support network while they're going through. The second thing that we were talking about was watching that line of, is someone coming here with any addiction history? Because then you have to be really careful with it. So again, I think this is a longer conversation, but I think it's something that we are seeing works for some people. And again, just like we were talking about earlier, making sure that they're supported, and that's not the only thing that they're usually using, or the only resource that they're using.
Stay curious, but find somebody to be curious with that is clinically trained. I think is super important in all of this work, right? And it's accessible now, and so I think for a long time there was hesitation around finding that kind of support because I can barely afford a gym membership, and so this is something that we've made accessible over the past few years. Tatum's doing that work with their mental health fund. Backline has a mental health fund. Music Cares provides a ton of financial support to people. And so if that's the hurdle, I throw it out the window. There's help out there for free that you can tap into to explore these things. And I think, the fact that psychedelic medicine is now part of the conversation is just another avenue in that's going to work really great for someone, and it's not going to be the right fit for someone else, and you need to be doing that work alongside somebody who's licensed to nurture you and shepherd you through that. Anything else you want to leave the audience with before we go to questions? No? We're ready for your questions, everyone. Oh, we got one right up front.
Hey, Johnny Scoblianco, Bauer Entertainment Marketing. I'm just curious, particularly for you, Andy, and the rest of the group, how have you noticed artist processes changing when writing or on the road, when searching for creative muses as they become more aware of their mental health? And it's not just like, oh, let's get an ounce of cocaine and lock ourselves in a cabin for a weekend, and more like, okay, we have to make this album, but then we have to have our heads together enough to then promote it and know what to then do with this art.
Yeah, I think people are talking about ice baths. Like, the boys, we've been talking about doing ice baths together and just getting the dopamine not from, with me, I take a shit ton of mushrooms. I know it's bad, I should say that, but that's I don't really do the coke or anything, but I do love psilocybin for creativity. But some other people it doesn't relate to. So we've been talking with the idea of all just getting an ice bath for the van and just 5 dudes in one ice bath. No, that would be actually kind of hot, actually. No, but I really think we just got to find different outlets of being creative. Because, you're totally right. In the 70s, the Dead used to just get an ounce of blow and say, let's make a record. And it's not I don't think with the knowledge of everything, how people are getting, going through overdoses and whatnot, and with the Narcan, I'm so thankful they're finding Narcan, and that is, we got to have all bands have that in the van just in case a fan gives you drugs. But I really think by communication and understanding that, being creative with 5 people is extremely hard. So I think finding these other outlets of, ice baths or having a group therapist all put someone on the same page so we could all be part of the same pictures, I think is important as well. So.
And note too, in the 70s, when that was more prevalent, we didn't have 24/7 news cycles, and our brain wasn't processing all the time. So chemically, our brains have changed. So it is very different, and that the whole idea that you could do that and be sustainable today, you can't.
I think some bands still do that, to be fair. I just hope that as part of this conversation, fentanyl testing is important before you use, right? So Narcan is helpful in the case of an overdose, but you shouldn't be using any drug without testing it for fentanyl first. Fentanyl test strips are available online. It's an important part. If you are gonna use, if that is part of your creative process, you can do that safely.
Sorry, I don't mean to sound like a teetotaler. That's not it at all. Our goal is just career longevity, and whatever that means for you, please know that.
We have another question.
Hi, thank you for all that you're all doing. Stacy with School of Rock. We have 60,000 students worldwide. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I've heard it said a few times today. We are like sex and drugs over there, just rock and roll. We stress that a lot. We have anonymous reporting platform that kids can reach out to for help or reach out to with concern for somebody else to get help. We have partnered with the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. We have QR codes in bathrooms with signs that say, we want you in the band, you know, chat, take this picture, we'll chat with you for help. We have all these resources available. And we still lost 5 community members last year to suicide, 3 of them young children. And I'm just wondering, you know, we're very mindful of the artists that we bring in that work with our kids to inspire and influence them to ensure that they're promoting healthy lifestyles, that we are promoting healthy lifestyles when they're out on the road. But what else can we do? Because 5 is just 5 too many. And we're just constantly asking ourselves, and every time one of those situations happen, I take it very personally and challenge myself to be better and to do better for all of them. So I'm just curious if you have any perspective or ideas on what are we missing?
Well, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, you're doing a lot, and that's more than, you know, a lot of places. However, I will say the kids that are growing up today are dealing with an incredibly different way of life than we are, and whether that's social media and the anxiety that creates, it comes down to education, not only for the kids and what you're doing, but also for the families to know what's going on, and for others around them to recognize what's happening. And I think what you're doing is a lot and is where you should be going, and just keep continuing increasing that and make sure that the families and the friends have all the resources like what we're talking about right now.
And access to adolescent practitioners is hard. It's tricky, and it's a lot. In Nashville, in the last 2 weeks, we've had a horrific school shooting, and with that comes the need for trauma-informed therapy, and trying to find that for a group of 250 kids is not an easy task. What I can tell you, and now we've done this, help navigate through this too many times to count. But what we found in Nashville, we have a resource list of adolescent trauma-informed counselors that we just keep updated all the time. I know Backline's working on this all the time. So just an idea, I know you don't want to be the one referring to counselors all the time, but just maybe having a list on hand that you can circulate if it's needed to parents. I mean, you're sitting in a tricky position because you're dealing with minors. But the communication and giving people the safe space that you're giving them to be expressive is a huge win already.
Yeah, and one other thing that sticks out for me is to be compassionate with yourself and have compassion. As you said, that you take it personally, which is, of course, makes sense, but I would invite you to have compassion for yourself.
Sounds like you're already doing a lot of the work, right? And preventative care is all that we can do. And unfortunately, there are still lives lost to suicide every single day. And providing grief support and survivor support is another avenue, you know, to say no more lives lost, right? And to provide space to process grief together can be really helpful. I don't have any experience in adolescent mental health, so there are professionals out there, you know, there are resources and databases, but I think also it sounds like the model that you've put into place with anonymous reporting and all of that, like you're doing enough, and I think the compassion piece is big here.
Do you think mental health, do you think social media is affecting our mental health with idolizing other people's happiness versus idolizing our own happiness?
Absolutely, and I think even beyond that, and especially in adolescence, bullying is rampant. But the highlight reel is certainly something that I think we all face. And for artists and industry folks, it's really easy to get caught up in that because there's always a show announcement, there's always a new album and something else to look at and say, well, they're doing that. And I think that compassion for self is really important in that because breaks are wildly important to my creativity and to my mental health. And so having to, pump the brakes and do nothing is actually the most important thing that I do for myself sometimes. And so it means not putting out an announcement. It means actually sitting back. But I think we have to be really strategic around how we use social media and when we use it. Because we're also contributing to that highlight reel oftentimes, right? If you're only popping up there when you have something good to say, then you're part of that. And I think we are seeing a lot more transparency in social media these days, and I hope that that continues where folks are saying, I'm taking a break for my mental health, or, I'm canceling this tour, and cancellations are a big thing that we deal with at Backline. You cancel a tour for your mental health, and the comments section doesn't care. They are mad that you're not coming to their city, that you canceled something, and everyone says don't read the comments, but how can you not engage with these people who have been supporting you? It's almost impossible to ignore the comments. But I hope that the work that we're doing in the industry and the messaging that we're using around a show cancellation can inspire empathy in the fan base, right? So are you putting out the same caption that you always use when you cancel a show, or are you looking at it with a second glance and adding a level of thoughtfulness and, if possible, transparency as to why the cancellation happened so that the fan base is invited and called in to support whatever the situation is and send best wishes instead of a bunch of FUs. So I think that is something that we can change in the music industry, is the lens in which we're approaching marketing and social media and recognizing that it does have a ripple effect on fan bases. Any other questions? We have 2.5 minutes.
I don't know if there's really much of a question, but I'm Alex with David's Den. We are a resource center here in Nashville that help musicians that struggle with suicide and depression. Just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying with the social media, we see a lot of that. A lot of guys and gals will come in and just that they see somebody that they know or they wrote with that's often doing something, and they come in and they're like, oh, first it's happy and they're good about it. Then after a while it's this SOB, I wrote with him, or I'm better than it, and you see him go down the rabbit hole. So the social media, it is a good, there's a necessary, I understand the positives and the net, I see a lot of negatives with that, with really about artists, they, like I say, they, very sensitive, and I see, I particularly don't really care for social media, and like you said about the bowling, in my generation, when I went home, I had a bully, but when I went home, he wasn't there, now I'm I'd be in my bedroom and now they can get you. So social media is just a horrible thing. And then, we were also, the other thing is, we were also talking to you, y'all talking about the having counselors. What we do, obviously we're nowhere as the size of some of y'all up there, but we have counselors that work with our musicians, and when they go on the road, they have contact with them. So if they're on the road, they can call their therapist, they can text them and say, hey, I'm having issues, which makes, obviously at the level that we are, it makes it possible. So that's something that we're doing that really seems to be a big help. And also, I think with musicians, you have to be relatable. If you're just some square and you don't really understand or you don't get it, you're not going to open up. I mean, I've had my struggles, and that's kind of where you mentioned, I know Nucci Space came up. That's kind of where I went through, got my help, and kind of got my launch into what I'm doing today. But you have to be able to relate, and so it's really about trying to find the right, where you fit in. I think when people come in and talk to us, or whether it's myself, they know I've looked down a barrel of a gun. They know I'm not going to lock you up. And that's some of the biggest things I think people get nervous about, is when they open up, is it okay? Are they going to keep me? So those are some of the challenges that we see. But I'm just kind of going off at this point. But that's kind of my thoughts on everything. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. this conversation, it can be heavy, but I hope that everyone here is leaving with a note of hope and the fact that you can affect change and you can create a better community, a safer, happier, and healthier music industry. It's just a matter of figuring out what lever that is for you. So if you are a venue, a promoter, you're part of a festival, there's something that you can do to make this industry safer and more supported. So I hope you leave, feeling positive about where we are and where we're going. Thank you so much.